Oh. Chunky.
Okay. I'll say hi, everybody.
Sorry, say hi. Cindy just popped in. So.
Okay. So welcome. This is the slide deck talking. Welcome to our improvement review. Thanks for joining us, everybody here on the panel, and those that are watching us at home. Feel free to add or access all of our online slides as well to the notes, which everybody should have access to do it. I will pass it off to Daisy, who's our facilitator. And we're so happy to have New Tech Network with us presenting. So Daisy, off to you.
Great, thanks so much. And thanks to Nick from New Tech. And so what we're going to do today is an improvement review. And Ryan, do you want to pop to the next slide real quick? We'll go over the agenda. All right. So our protocol that we're going to follow today is we're going to start with a presentation from Nick for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have about 5 minutes for clarifying questions, and then probing minutes for 7, and we'll move into a discussion for 50 minutes. I'm going to be a fairly active facilitator and hopefully line people up, so just be prepared for that. And then we'll move into a reflection and where the New Tech presenters will get to feedback, followed by a debrief of the protocol. So some of our norms to be reminded of are hard on the content, soft on the people. We endeavor to be kind, helpful, and specific, share the air, and again, I'm going to be an active facilitator. So Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us situated.
Great. Thanks, Daisy. So I'm probably just going to dive, we all, I feel like, know each other pretty well by this point in time, so I'm going to skip a lot of the introductions. But that's sort of, if slide 5, Ryan just sort of kind of talks about who our team is, and just sort of conceptually, we have a New Tech Network organization team that's participating in this work, as well as 2 schools, and there are 2 practitioners that have been joining us in this work from each school, and there are some, and so that's sort of who the team is, and really the approach to this review today isn't necessarily about the work that's happening at any one of our schools, but more so about how we're approaching this work as a network team, and sort of even as a network of schools in general. So if you want to go to the next slide, great, Ryan, you're right on it. So sort of what really brought us to this work is even before we had the opportunity to join this NIC, we were formed as a team, and we were trying to answer this question around how can we measure awareness, how can we measure student awareness around college and career readiness and the pathways to get to that readiness. And so New Tech Network, we have a school success rubric that maybe, I don't know if everybody can access that link, but maybe if Ryan or somebody can post it in the chat, that might be helpful. So there's a part of that, there's lots of parts on that rubric that we have developed measurements in terms of driving towards school quality, but around our college and career outcomes, we have some gaps. And so we really wanted to hone in on this domain of awareness, because we don't really have any tools to coach schools around that, and we don't have any really good measures. So if you want to go to the next slide, so we kind of started to create a process, and before we joined the NEC, we knew that we had this idea that we wanted to recruit some schools that also wanted to help us figure this out, or were also asking similar questions around awareness. And so kind of while we were thinking about doing that, the opportunity to join the NIC came along, and so it seemed like just a really good opportunity to kind of merge both things. And so we went through a application process, and our 2 schools that are now part of this work materialized as the ones that are now part of our team. And so our kind of goals or loose theory of action was really that, hey, let's use improvement science as a way to learn about this work, and as a way to potentially uncover some things that are happening in some test schools that are focusing on awareness, and then be able to get some really good practices and some really good data out of that process, and then share with the rest of our network, very similar to the sort of purpose and intent behind the whole networked improvement community work. So that was sort of our bigger goal as a team. So if you want to kind of, we'll go through, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about fishbones and driver diagrams, but I wanted to share the fishbones from one of our schools because both of our schools are kind of tackling a similar problem. And I felt like this fishbone, or we as a team also, this is very much a team effort on this presentation. I'm just the one talking. So Emil and Jose are also here. Kelly, unfortunately, wasn't able to join us. But we felt sort of as a team that this really reflected what was happening in schools and what was happening that was leading us to not really understand this idea of awareness very well. So if you want to kind of move forward to the drivers, these are the most, both of our schools have gone through a couple of, about 2 iterations of their driver diagram. This is their most recent one for Memorial Early College High School that they crafted in at the last convening in last month, and the following slide is the one for the community school, which they crafted also at our convening. So both aims are geared around students have some type of articulation of a plan, and then each school has contextualized that a little bit differently in the term, depending upon their district and sort of what other things are happening at that school. But it's really about students articulating some kind of a plan, and that unto itself, and what that means, I think, is a lot of the work that our schools and our team is trying to kind of figure out. So some data that we collected kind of as part of a culture survey mid-year are the things that we'll present over the next 4 slides or so. So the first in there, and it's sort of it's a slide, it's really 2 slides, one from each school. So the first couple of slides talk about how much, how ready students feel toward getting a job, applying for college, obtaining financial aid. And then, so we have that data for both schools in terms of how ready students are feeling. I know for the case of Memorial Early College, these are actually 9th and 10th graders that are answering these surveys. I can't remember in terms of the community school. Emil and or Cindy, if she's there, might be able to answer that better for me in the questions. And so I think it's interesting to see where students are feeling ready and when they're saying that they're feeling ready in terms of this process. So if you kind of spend some time, you can look at the community school. I can't really see where you're at, Ryan's, and so I'll let you decide on how much time you want to spend on each slide, giving people the opportunity to look at the data. So I think the next 2 slides sort of talk about something a little bit different in that they're sort of not so much talking about their readiness, but they're talking about their plans. And these aren't necessary. I find it interesting to see sort of how those different pieces of data connect to each other around what they say they're ready for, but then what students actually say their plans are. And so I think that there's a lot of different conclusions that our schools can make and draw from based on what they see there. You jump down to slide sort of 15, Ryan. One of the pieces that we did pull out that we wanted to highlight was that sort of 34% of at least the students at Memorial Early College stated that they didn't feel ready to be successful. And we didn't necessarily have a time to process this a whole lot as a team, but I find that interesting that 76% of 9th and 10th graders think that they are ready in 9th and 10th grade. And that unto itself I found kind of interesting. So, and then we're wondering, like, if the students have built like feelings about if they can pay for college, how much that's factoring into their decision making, and that over half of these students felt that they didn't know how was really interesting in terms of thinking about what choices they might make moving forward. So some things that we kind of learned as we go along the way, and I'm going to probably talk a little bit faster here as I think my time might be running up.
2 minutes.
Got it. So we spent a lot of time just, I think, around some early lessons moves. We just spent a ton of time trying to just figure out what IR was and got really caught up in that. And then we just kind of relaxed and said, let's just do work and let schools like just do practice and worry less about accountability. But now we're getting to a spot where we really do want to create some boundaries to this work and really start getting some good data about some of these things that we want to measure. And we're struggling to find some traction there. So that leads us to our question about sort of what our current dilemma is. And so we want to try to find out, how can we use measurement in ways that empower schools to hone in on one area of meaningful work and not feel like they have to do everything at once? So as I started going too fast, I skipped something. And the other thing that we learned was that schools are feeling like this is additional work for them, and we don't want them to feel that way. We want them to feel like this is aligned with something they really want to focus on as a school, and college and career readiness is a huge underlying common denominator of all of our schools. And so how can we kind of close that gap a little bit? So that's where that help them feel like they're not doing it, they don't have to do everything all at once, that's where that kind of comes from. So the next couple slides you could take a minute to review are really just this was inspired by Connect Ed's work. They did a great job of sort of just asking their school teams like what they were thinking and feeling around their dilemma. And so we did the same. So we just asked our 2 practitioners at each schools to take independent surveys. And I found, we haven't talked about it as a team, but it's interesting to see. So you can see the questions there, and you can see some of the responses that I've condensed from the questions. And just some places are really interesting, and some places, I just found those responses interesting in terms of helping us figure out how to support them in really getting focused and using data to get to that focus. So, that's sort of where I'll end.
Okay, thank you. So the current dilemma that we're going to focus on was move into clarifying questions. They're interested in how can we use measurement to hone in on one area of meaningful work as they move forward. For clarifying questions, we're looking for questions that they can answer quickly. They're brief, factual, sort of like, where is this work embedded right now, or questions of that nature. And we'll take about 5 minutes. And my lineup here, just to give you kind of 30 seconds thinking, is Tom, Scott, Michael, Kira. Jose, do you want to be part of the presenting team and pull back, or do you want to weigh in? Okay.
He's presenting.
All right. Okay, all right. And then Gabby, and then we've got Ben. And we have somebody joining on the end there.
That's Emil. He's part of our presenting team.
Okay, great. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Emil. All right, so 5 minutes. And we're starting with Scott. Or Tom, sorry.
So I think I was interested in the survey, the one that both schools did about those different areas that the student self-reported readiness around. Have staff engaged with that, with those results?
I'm going to ask Jose to maybe answer that one for Memorial.
I can't hear you, Jose.
Oh, that sounds more promising. Oh, no, we still can't hear you. Jose, while we worry about that.
I can answer on behalf of community
sure.
School a little bit.
Okay, great. Or it's like you can type it in. That'd be great.
Yeah. So I would say that I'm not sure. I'm not clear if they have. This particular survey came out in December, if I'm correct. Emil, December-ish. Yep. And so I'm not confident that they have spent some time digesting this current set. But I know we did look at the similar culture survey data from but from 6 months to a year prior, to sort of set up the framing of our fishbones and of our driver diagram. So I know they've looked at sort of how students respond to these questions, but I don't know if they've looked at this most recent set.
Also, for our panelists, feel free to chat in your questions in the chat on the side that can help line us up.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, man. I was having an issue earlier today as well. I didn't catch the question, Tom. I was sidetracked. I don't know if you don't feel that Nick answered it. I'd be more than happy to answer it as well.
Well, Jose, I was just wondering, the question was around have schools had the opportunity to sort of spend some time looking at the data, the culture survey data from December in relation to their current work? And I wasn't sure about Memorial, so I thought you might be able to speak to that.
Yeah, so Memorial has not looked at the recent cultural survey in terms of their recent or their current aim, and I think that just kind of brings up another issue in terms of just one of my support with them not being their actual coach. There's some conversations that as a coach of that school on a regular basis, I'd most likely have that conversation and help them make sense of the culture survey. But from my understanding, they have not done that at this point.
And so I'm just going to go down the line, but also feel free to pass if you don't have a clarifying question. That's totally fine. And Rob, I missed you in my line, so I'll add you in too. But so Scott, any clarifying questions?
Yeah, as you looked at your data, did you find any weaknesses in it? Like, did it generate new questions that you wanted to ask, or did it make you want to tweak any of the questions that were already there?
Yeah, for me personally, I wanted to compare, like, I want to find out, like, I'd like to kind of create some side-by-side kind of representations of student aspirations and then what actually happens. A lot of our data that we have is self-reported data, and I think my hunch is that if we're not real confident students are aware of what their options are, then when they pick those options, how viable, is that information about what they're actually going to do? And so I think, we have NSC data and we pour through that as much as we can, but I think we're trying to figure that out as well, as how do we kind of figure out, how do we continue to track better what the decisions they make, and then cross-reference that with their aspirations.
So Rob, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? You're next up here in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, my question was just what kinds of regular time do teachers have to, address their own questions and to address questions around college and career readiness. And I think this is related to it's just a question about structure, about what structures are already in place in your schools where teachers can do this work so that it doesn't feel like extra work or involving extra time.
Yeah, so frankly, I don't know if we can point to any real clear structures. I mean, we definitely have really, really solid structures around adult learning and around coaching and around how that supports deeper learning. But I think to what end and where those structures are that answer the question to what end is definitely an area where we need to grow. So I think that when you think about, like, the world of guidance counseling and the world of sort of helping schools create pathways, that is definitely, I think, a growing edge of ours as an organization.
Ben, do you want to go ahead and ask your question, because it seems to link?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear more about, so if the idea of creating a college and career plan feels like extra work, I was wondering if it's more about, like, filling out PDSA forms that feels like, why do we have to do that? Or it's just extra? Or is it about, like, the working on the plan itself? Or is it just both? Or just anything more you could say about that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Can I add something really quick, Nick, too, that might also address Rob's question? So, like, for example, Memorial has they meet every Tuesday they have an early day, so the staff is able to meet for 2 hours. And I think one thing that they're finding is this improvement research work is not on top of their agenda. So really, so a lot of the work that they're doing is still around project-based learning or trying to, around, assessing learning outcomes. Like there's other conversations that are taking place in lieu of, this work around improvement, and they see it as separate. So for Memorial, they're only working with the 11th grade advisory teachers, which are only 3 teachers, 3 out of a staff of 12. So like almost 1/4 of their teachers. So that's one of the conversations that I'm continuing to have with them and thinking about, like, how do you start to bring on board the other advisors into these conversations.
Jose, do you on that? Do you feel like at the moment that the career and college plan feels like extra work around creating a career and college plan, or is it the use of improvement tools? Just to get at Ben's question as well.
That's a good question. I think I feel like the 2 people that are taking the lead on this work at Memorial, so Meredith and Danette, they're starting to use these improvement tools in other aspects of the work, but I just feel like they're doing it and they're taking the lead on that, and they're not really onboarding other folks into being more active in those conversations.
And is creating that career and college plan part of the coursework in advisory already? Is that something that everybody's on board with?
It is, but it's usually only done at the 11th and 12th grade. So even so, this is where, like, early on when they were creating their aim, they were focusing on both the 11th and 12th graders, and what they realized is it felt like very different work, because the 12th graders should have been almost finishing this plan, and they felt that by focusing on the 11th graders, they would have more opportunities to make some changes and to get a different result. So by doing that, what they ended up doing was just only focusing with the 11th grade advisors, which kind of, another 3 people kind of, got taken out of the conversation.
Great. And so we've got 2 clarifying questions, and I want to just shift us into probing questions. But Kira, do you want to ask yours? And then Rob.
So just in the interest of thinking about what data sources could help teachers feel like they're a little bit more honed in, or help you feel like the teachers are a bit more honed in and that it's not this additional thing. Of all of the PDSAs that you've done so far and the data that you've looked at and collected, is there something that they are excited about or curious about? Or, I mean, could you like rate them on a scale of 1 to 10? Which ones were useful, which ones were not useful?
I might look to you again on that one, Jose.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so speaking from Memorial, I think some of the data. So one of their next steps after our convening in March was to go and to ask 4 questions to their students. Let me pull those questions up really quick. But so in these questions, what came up for? Oh man, I have too many documents open. But basically, I'm not gonna be able to find it. Sorry. The questions were really around, like, where do you, like, what's your plan after high school, and then like how will you kind of complete that plan. So in looking at the responses for those 2 questions, what's really kind of coming up for Memorial, or what they found interesting was that there were some students who were able to identify what they wanted to do for their career, but their plan wasn't really aligned for that, right? So they might have someone who said that I wanted to kind of major in chemical engineering, but then their plan to do so was to get into a good college, to study really hard, to make as many connections as possible, and then I'll be able to be successful in that career. So they're just starting to really kind of start thinking about is how do we better help them understand that path that they have to take once they do choose a career.
I'm going to open us up to some probing questions as well, but there will be some clarifying mixed in. So Rob, you had a question, and then we also have Cindy and Sarah here in the room if you want to get the community school perspective as well. So Rob, do you want to go ahead with your question? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Mine was just a simple clarifying question. Are your advisories organized by grade level?
I know they are at the community school. I'm assuming they are at Memorial. Yep. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And then Ben, did you want to ask yours?
Well, I guess maybe my question is a little bit different than when I posed it. So the dilemma is how to use measurement in ways that empower schools to hone in on one area. And their goal is that everyone has a plan. So it seems like you already have your answer. So then say more about why you have a dilemma.
So we're not sure how to help schools use data to answer to. So if I look, your question that you wrote is easier, so I'm gonna answer that one. I think that both schools are trying to create a plan. The first iteration of what a plan might be. In the case of, and both are in a little bit of different context too. So Memorial is an early college high school, so they have students already on an AA pathway when they graduate from 12th grade as well. And Cindy and Sarah can talk more about this, but in Spokane Public Schools, the district has adopted a T24 plan, which stands for Technical 2-Year 4-Year. But I have not seen evidence that there's a district plan beyond the fact that they want everybody in one of those sort of pathways.
Cindy, do you want to talk a little bit about that, or Sarah?
Sure, Sarah wants to. So the district right now has relied on several other organizations and plans and lessons that they have in place. So right now our plan is a piece of paper that is filled out, and there are categories like, do you know where you're going to go? And if you pick military early on, you're basically getting tracked that way. If you pick a 2-year, so depending on what you tell right away in some basic survey work that the district has done, we're trying to batch and track kids in kind of the old school system, and there's not a comprehensive plan where kids are looking at all of the options available to them. And there is some work being done with pockets of people, but mostly the work that we're already doing is ahead of what they've done. And so the idea is that kids can stand up and tell us what we want to hear about. They have a plan and some indicators that it might be a successful plan, but it's not hammered out in a way that we feel is beneficial, and that a kid really knows that the plan is something that if they change it, they're prepared to do something else later. And but it really is just a piece of paper, and now everybody's trying to build out what needs to go in to that piece of paper for it to be meaningful.
And I'll just comment on some of the work that we were doing with Memorial Early College High School that I was talking with them today, which also goes into this. As we've continued to try to use data to focus in on a specific area, one of the things that they looked at when they did their most recent survey of students was how many students actually said they had a plan for the year after they graduated high school versus how many actually had an idea of a career or a pathway they were interested in going. And one of the data points that came up with them that was really interesting in thinking about what a change idea or what an aim could look like would be only 3 students said they didn't know what they were going to do after they graduated high school. The vast majority had an idea what they were going to do, but 12 out of, I think it was about 42 students, said they had no idea what they were actually hoping to do once they graduated college.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So other probing questions at this point? Gabby? Is there anything that's coming up for you? Oh, maybe she's froze. Anybody else? Scott, maybe?
In terms of when you guys were looking at the data and breaking it down, did one or two pathways kind of just jump out at you guys as like, this is the way we want to go, or this is the way we want to go? Did something kind of like intuitively strike you as like the pathway you're thinking about going down, or are you guys completely at a, we just don't know what to do with the data and we just want all ideas on the table?
I think speaking for the network team, I think it's, I think some of the assumptions I've, personally had is that how can we help our schools find, I think, more frequent data indicators in their work that is potentially aligned with other work that's also happening in the school that tells them something about, their aim. And so I think we have annual, college data that comes out, and we have, our surveys that we sort of, we can use, that we use as a network, on a periodic basis. But I'm wondering, I think for me, and I'd love to hear, Emil and Jose as well, like what are some things that can help? What are some measurements that are aligned with this work that can help our schools get quicker feedback in their efficacy?
Thanks. Tom, did you want to go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll probably transition into the discussion?
Sure. So I guess my question is really about kind of to Nick's point earlier of like there seems to be a discrepancy about the way students are self-reporting in the early grades about their aspirations and plans, and then how that changes for older students. So the question is like, would it look differently if you added the 11th and 12th graders? But I think that maybe the question I'm curious about with Cindy and Sarah is, like what's really important for you as a school to measure related to this idea of the plan, that's so important that you would look at it, you'd want to know every year, and you would also want to know after high school.
Do you guys want to take that?
I'm not sure what he's asking. Well, I guess that's part of the discussion that we're having as a staff anyway, is what do we want to message to students about what quality of life looks past us? And we have all socioeconomic groups, and it's a little bit difficult because we do so much individualized that we're struggling to so this plan, everyone needs to have a plan, but what needs to go in the plan? Do we make everyone have a plan A, B, and C? Do they have to look into military? Do they have to look into going straight to work? Do they have to look at the gap year? So we have a little bit of a struggle in, if we don't make them exposed to it, then they won't know, versus actually if we just show them how to make good decision-making skills and follow one plan and know that most people don't follow a set career or path along the way, is that good enough to prepare them later down the line when they do choose a path and then decide they want something else? So we are struggling as a staff on that answer. And there's probably not a correct way to do it. We're probably going to be fine because we are doing something, but we just want to be sure that we're giving them what they deserve.
I would add, too, that the structure of our school is heavy on exploration. So especially in the first year or two, we want our kids to really dabble in a lot of different possibilities, as opposed to this pressure that, there is definitely a pressure in our district around technical 2-year, 4-year, and this push to make a decision. Even in middle school, they're asked, what's your T24 plan? And in elementary school. And we want them to have that belief and mindset that the community school is a launch pad for what they will do next. Now we want them to explore what it is that are their gifts, their passions, what they do want to do, what they think they want to do, learn more about it, because sometimes students find out they don't want to do that because they did a job shadow or an internship, and all of a sudden that idea that I had when I was a child isn't what I want to do anymore. So we do a lot of exploration. I think where I'd like to see us go is more clear college connections, and because we don't have a counselor at our school yet, we have allocated now for a part-time counselor that will be really helpful in making those college connections beyond what the advisors are doing, so that all of our students will be exposed to the options that are local and then options that are further away and outside of our state. Right now we're kind of in the exploratory stage of what do I want to follow, my, what's my passion, what are my gifts, what are possible careers to that.
Okay. So I'd like to transition us into the discussion phase. Maybe we can pose the new tech question one more time, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, just to give everybody a chance to look at it. Is there any thing you guys would want to amend? Does this still feel like the burning question for you? How can we use measurement to hone in on one area of meaningful work and not feel like people have to do everything at once? Does that still feel like the question where we want to focus the discussion around?
Yes, I think so.
Great. So we're going to ask the new tech folks to hang back, and the rest of us will just go ahead and engage in a discussion. If I go down the other direction, we'd be starting with Gabby, and then moving to Kira, Michael, Rob, Scott, and Tom, but feel free to go ahead and type your questions into the chat, and we'll transition over there if it feels more organic. But Gabby, you're going to be up for starting. We could start with just some positive feedback about things we've heard, and then move into addressing their question. So 15 minutes. Let's go for it. Oh, I don't think we can hear you, Gabby. Can you hear us? Uh-oh. Not so much. Kira, do you want to jump in?
Sure, yeah. I really appreciate this dilemma, because I think it speaks to the truth about the fact that it's difficult to do this improvement sort of work when the sort of people you're working with are in such very different contexts. And so I just want to commend the New Tech staff on the hard work that they're trying to do, pulling together some kind of consensus across these different contexts. And are we doing warm feedback first, and like as a group, or?
I think we can also transition to discussion if there's something that you.
I haven't actually had a moment to formulate a useful comment at this point yet.
So I think Daisy froze, so I'll step in and say, Michael, do you have anything to say? Any warm feedback or for our team?
Yeah, for warm feedback, and can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. For warm feedback, I love that New Tech has a school success rubric, that their involvement with the improvement science was already preceded by work and thought about measuring student awareness around career and college readiness. So I love the overlap there. I think that will serve, the fact that they have a track record of having done that already will serve to help resolve this question about how to do more overlapping so that there's not extra work, and do things that are in line with what they want to do. And then should I go on with the discussion part?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. One thing I want to grab onto Sarah's comment, actually, that I loved, was the question about whether you map out 5, 6, 7 different plans or just work on good decision-making skills. And it reminded me of a quote that planning is everything and plans are nothing. So I think that teaching the skill of planning and doing those in rapid iterations and then expanding the time horizon, so you could plan something for what you're going to do by the end of the week, a month, a semester, and continually teaching those skills will serve folks more than trying to come up with static plans for multiple different areas, like military, plan A, plan B, plan C, gap year, and so forth. So I love the idea of teaching planning, teaching good decision-making skills. And I think that can be interwoven with exposure and strength explorations and passions, you know, exposure to all those things.
Rob, do you have a celebration?
Yeah, I really like the survey and the survey questions. I thought that they were not only about they produced information not only about whether students have plans or not, but also about the school environment, about whether they feel that in the environment they're supported to have those plans. So that, in other words, the surveys yield data not only about students and their aspirations and where they are with respect to them, but also about the school itself. So I thought it was a great survey. I think that there's a and I love the comments about. I think that it was Sarah that was making them about that the school is heavy on exploration during the 9th and 10th grades and is asking questions like, "What's my passion?" and so on. I think that we all experience inordinate pressure to make decisions and decide on pathways before we're ready to. I mean, I'm still not ready to make decisions about my future, but which leads me to think about how students might be thinking about these questions, and it's not necessarily do I have a plan or not, but one question is that they might be asking, or that they might, a statement that they might want to make is that this work that I'm engaged in now has a future. I don't know necessarily what that future is. I don't necessarily have a plan, but there is a future in this work that I'm doing. And then a second question, of course, which we all recognize is the students are asking, is whether or not this current work that I'm doing has relevance and meaning for me now. And I think that, interestingly, when we find that students are engaged in work that has that, to me, that's the key question. And when students are engaged in work that they think is meaningful and authentic now, it also turns out to be work that has a future, that they think has a future. So I'm rambling a little bit, but these are some of the associations that I'm having to this conversation.
Gabby, I want to make sure you get a chance to. Do you want to give a shot to reading out again, and if you can't, I'll go ahead and read it for you, and then Tom and Scott will get your comments too. Now it looks like it's still off, so I'll give it a shot for you. So Gabby writes, I appreciate that New Tech is focused on making this a meaningful experience for the schools. I appreciate that they're looking at the non-cognitive skills. We found here at our site that what we focus so much on a plan and don't teach the skills students will need to persevere, like grit and study skills. I'd also say that it may be beneficial to weave this work into an existing structure on the site to help it feel less of a burden. For example, we're considering connecting our work to our aim to the work that our instructional lead team is doing and potentially combining those teams into one. There's some interesting things there about streamlining the work that I think are incredibly useful. So Tom and then Scott.
So I appreciate the New Tech effort to gather more information from their teams to understand what's working and not working for them related to improvement science, and to try and identify some greater perspective around that question. Is it the improvement science that's getting in the way, or the just this idea of the plan in general. And I also think, I appreciated the comment about the desire for flexibility. I think, Michael, you captured it well. This idea that you don't want to do what seems like the district's prescribed, like make a decision right now about your future, but really about, building out the skills for students to make good choices. I guess to that point, since the question is about measurement, if that is the framework, I guess my question is, how has that team or any of the teams been thinking about measuring that decision making, and maybe specific to their college and career planning? And so I think to be able to act upon it and know where students are in their ability to make informed decisions related to their post-secondary plans. How will you know if they're doing that better this time next year than they are right now?
And for me, first of all, I always appreciate when people are really considering the teachers and thinking about how do we do things in a way that doesn't feel like more is being placed upon them. And in these kinds of cases, being strategic can sometimes really work into play. Looking in the textbooks for those like career connections pieces. With the Asian Society, one of the things that we're always doing within our units is really looking at the authentic job that goes with whatever connects to the content, so that kids can not only explore the content, but they're exploring all the different kinds of jobs that they could do around it. And in a lot of cases, the project is set up that says in a way like, you are an entrepreneur, you are a biologist. It's always like kind of set up like that to give them that impression of you can do this job because you're going to do what they do. So that can sometimes work in the favor of teachers by just that simple piece, if that's not already a part of it.
Some comments. Anybody have a comment on what's been said by Rob, Tom, or Scott?
I have a comment.
Great.
I'm just I'm thinking back to the notion of internships and so forth. And when is it that a student begins to really understand that there are possible futures out there, and that I'm going to be picking one, and so on. And I think at High Tech High, there's two things going on in our experience at High Tech High. One is that, we place a lot of emphasis on going to college, for better or worse. And students may have heard it from their parents, and they have certainly heard it from us that they're going to college, but they really understand that they're going to college and how it might connect to a pathway for them when they enter internships. And they're working alongside someone and realizing, hey, maybe I could do that work. Well, they're realizing maybe I don't want to do that work, but many of them are realizing maybe I could do that work. And my goodness, they're right. I need to go to college to do that. I think that I think that the awareness really, really grows and develops in 11th and 12th grades. But this takes me back to the notion of grade level advisory, because it raises the question then of where are the contexts in the school where 9th and 10th graders hear 11th and 12th graders struggling with and making discoveries about college and career and the pathways that they might take. I think that that's really critical, that because so much of that stuff is about the future is transmitted by peers. That's a wondering I have about where do the younger students interact with the older students around questions of what the future may hold.
So building off of that, I just want to read a text that came in from Stacy about this too, which is, she says, a possible indicator to check in on more frequently, can they identify a passion or a purpose that could drive a multitude of plans or paths? So maybe it's like, I'm exploring these multiple ideas for after I graduate. I see this work is relevant to my life now, and here's how it could be relevant to these possible futures. And then Kira, you had a comment building off of Tom's. Do you want to go for that?
Yeah, it was just what he said, and what Cindy had said earlier made me think about the fact that this is, again, an iterative process, and I think in the interest of trying to, capture smaller data points along the way, I think Stacy hit the nail on the head there. Like, what are the smaller questions you can have students reflect on like an ongoing basis, so they can see how their plans are changing, but their plans are changing in informed ways. And I think that then the teachers will be able to see change in a more frequent way, in a more kind of like organic way. And I'm still having a hard time figuring out how that would help them kind of narrow their focus, which would or make it seem like all of their kind of initiatives are more aligned. That part is still a little unclear to me. I think there's some kind of like I'm having a hard time sort of rectifying this idea about the plan being the thing that they're doing, and then the fact that like people feel like a little bit of sort of initiative fatigue and can't kind of align everything around this idea of focusing on the plan.
We have about another minute, and we have potentially Michael lined up. Oh, Tom, why don't you go ahead, and then Michael, if you have anything to say, and then Gabby, I know because you have the tech issue, if you want to type any last words, I'll make sure I read them out, so just make sure we hear from everybody.
So, in thinking about the dilemma question, how can we use measurement in ways that empower schools to hone in? I'm curious about the data that's already there, and that's why I asked if teams have looked at it. But I think there's something interesting in the slide 13, the Memorial Early College Survey, that 75% of the 9th and 10th graders clearly have a plan to enroll in a 4-year college. And compared against what was in slide 19, and I don't know if this is Memorial, if it's the same school or not, but that senior entry survey, that 17 out of 47 said that they don't know what they want to do after high school. And so I'm just curious about that discrepancy, that it seems like the older students get, apparently the less clear they are about their about wanting to go to college or whether or not there's anything there for them. And so kind of to Kira's point is like, are they making more informed decisions as a result of being exposed to more options, or could it have the opposite effect? Is it discouraging them from going because they realize how much they have to do to be able to get there and to be able to succeed? But I think there are a lot of interesting questions that some of this data could yield if there's a space to engage with those questions as a staff.
Any last comments before we invite New Tech back in?
Michael?
You keep getting voluntold.
I think that first of all, so I totally agree with the principle of overlapping it with initiatives that are already taking place. That's such a great strategy when it comes to people feeling like there's not enough time. So how to weave it in. And that's what we did with one of our schools in our NIC work. They already were working on the quality of their exhibitions, so they kind of backed it into the aim so that had something to do with civic readiness. And I feel like it's working really well for them because that's what's got all the staff's attention. But without knowing exactly what everybody's working on in their settings, it's hard to make recommendations as to what to overlap with. If there was work on the developing good decision-making skills, developing good planning skills, grit and study skills, as Gabby said, then measures around those things, like how many plans are kids making, how many of them have been successful, not about something far off in the future like college and career, but more short-term things about next week and so forth. So measuring that might have people focused on one thing.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and invite New Tech back. And we've got about 3 minutes, or we got 3 or 5. I think we have about 3-4 minutes to go ahead and reflect on what you heard and let us know what was useful.
Yeah, so I'd actually love to take like maybe 45 seconds each and do a whip around our team, if that's okay. And obviously members of our team can pass if they'd like to. I'll start though. For me, it's like, I think some of my thinking really, I mean, as I'm sure the protocol is designed to do, started really coming out of, some of the great questions that were being asked, and really thinking about, as a network, how we support schools structurally around some of the outcomes that we're talking about today. And I think that and then some of those structures came out in the discussion, which is really cool. And so I mean, I think specifically around, like, how do we get more things that happen every day to be linked to awareness of career pathways. I thought Stacy's idea was really great about finding ways to drive passions around and link that to different pathways. I think we do have some schools, Rob, that are mixed advisory for that exact same reason that you talked about, and but not many of them are. And even schools that aren't set up that way, I wonder what kind of structures they can put in place for those interactions to happen. But the other thing that just came to me really quickly is when we were actually all together last time and we did those breakout sessions, I went to the one that the other Ben facilitated on leading indicators. And I wonder, like, what kind of leading indicators might exist within the everyday instructional program that can link towards more awareness. And I think that could yield some more interesting data and some ways that our coaches could support schools as well. So I'll pass it to Jose or the community school or Emil.
We'll take it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been really helpful. I'm thinking about both Sarah and Rob talking about plans versus being able to plan. And there's this nice balance between self-awareness, knowing myself, what I bring to my future, which is what the community school is all about, is launching them into their future. And then there's the more technical pieces of how do I get there and what do I need to know to get there. I don't think it's wise to put the how do I get there before we work really deeply on things like agency and developing that sense of confidence and growth mindset that no matter what they do, that they'll lean back on that. So that's kind of the culture of this school is take risks, explore, fail forward, start letting those things design the path ahead of you, as opposed to here's the path, pick T24 and make it happen. So it's deeper than that, and we want to hold both those.
Yeah, I agree with Cindy's comment. As an advisor of a junior class, some of the things that I think that are helpful in this, Nick, and sitting here listening to this work, is that we have a team that agrees that it's far beyond checking boxes and it's far beyond meeting any traditional guidelines, and that we have support that if we need to fit into those boxes or jump through those hoops for students, we're willing to hold that and buffer them from those things and present it in a way that will empower them. So that's just something I really appreciate, and the conversation helped me think of that.
I think for me, what's resonating something that kind of Tom is bringing up is just really around, like, how are schools making sense of the data that they currently have access to, and then, like, are they finding that data meaningful? Because I think that's something that even in my work with Memorial Early College, it was always around, well, we need to create this new survey to get new data, and I'm wondering, like, it's just kind of bringing back to like what's causing them to feel that they need to create a new survey and not necessarily use the data that they already have access to, and what is it about the data that we have in this student culture survey, like, what's missing? Because I think even as I asked that, like, looking at the survey that they kind of created, one of the things that I'm noticing is they're able to put a face to the responses, and I could see that being helpful, because then they could see, how can I directly support that student, where our current data, you don't really know who said that and which, out of the grade level. So those are just things that are kind of coming up for me in the conversation.
And I'll just comment real quickly that as the data fairy for this team, one of my large places I've been sitting is how data can be really informed in showing the barriers to students reaching the goal that you want for them. So I really find the comments around, like, the difference between having a plan and learning to plan, and I just have a lot of wheels going on in my head around if planning itself is a barrier and learning to plan and students knowing how to plan is a barrier. What data would I really be looking at to say, yes, this is really a strong barrier we should be focusing our students on? Or, wow, maybe this isn't the most important piece for our students to be struggling with right now. Great things to think about.
Great, thank you. So I want to take the next kind of 3 or 4 minutes just to debrief the process. How did the protocol feel? Do we feel like we stuck to their question, and anything else that you want to take away from just this experience? But we want to hold back from re-engaging in the conversation itself. And maybe we can just go down the line, and again, feel free to pass if you want. So Amal, that's you first. Gabby, Cindy and Sarah, Jose, Kira, Michael, and I'll just keep asking. So Amal, why don't you start if you've got something?
I'm going to need a minute, so I'll pass for a second. But come back.
Sure, no problem. Gabby, anything you want to type in? Yeah. Yeah, the tech issue definitely made it difficult. Cindy or Sarah?
But we'll go.
Sure.
I like being able to put them on the spot here because I can totally fun. This is kind of fun. I can be off screen and say you're on.
Right. And so I was getting clarification. Are we commenting on this process or
Yes.
on the overall process of the NIC? Are we talking about this?
If it's really positive feedback on the NIC.
Two thumbs up.
Okay.
I got that on film. And we're off.
No, just about this process of how did the protocol feel? Do we feel like we stuck to the question? Were there spots where we could have improved?
Technical pieces sometimes well, just then when I couldn't ask you or tell you what the exact question was because some of either the legs or the mutes were a little hard for me to follow, but then I would get back on. So I think that was helpful. I love hearing what other people think about the things that we're trying to do and hearing their feedback. So that's always good. That's what I would say. Sarah, do you want to say anything?
I just think it's a great challenge to try to stick with the question that's posed to the group. Clearly, I'm a talker, and it's easy to go down with what my needs are. So, but I like knowing what the question is that Nick and the New Tech group have that's informing their work with us. And so trying to honor that, I think definitely will get better and better every time. And just knowing that your comment earlier about questions can change, is that still the question you want us to answer, was really helpful in this protocol.
I would say 2 turning points for the conversation too were just Michael and switching us from planning to plan, which I thought was really great, and Rob, who left, which I always say, but I think he has such a wealth of experience about how to reframe the things that we're thinking about. So those are 2 moments that stick out as kind of good turning points of the conversation.
We'll always have Michael and Rob on all of our calls from here on out. So, okay.
Oh, Rob,
have...
back.
Oh, great.
I was just saying you were a big turning point for the conversation, Rob. So you may appreciate that.
So Jose, any thoughts about the process?
Actually, so I was going back and just kind of looking over the question, and I just started thinking about like where it says like like do we really talk about ways to like empower schools, or do we just think through strategies that we could do to them? Like I guess that's something that I'm just wondering, and I probably need some more time to think about which one we did, but yeah. So.
What did you find this the process helpful? Were there any glitches or things that you would improve about the facilitation of the protocol? Or?
No, I thought that went really well. I thought it brought up a lot of questions for me.
Okay. Great. Kira, then Michael.
I feel like this one felt a little faster than normal. Like we shaved some time off, so or I don't know what maybe I'm just making it up, but so that felt a little challenging for me just in the brainstorming section. But I feel like the rest of the protocol went really smoothly, and there was adequate time for questions and clarifying questions and probing questions. And as always, I think that your facilitation, Stacey's facilitation, is keeps things moving in a way that works in this kind of bizarre techno meeting.
And so you felt like you needed some more time for the discussion piece to dig into it?
Yeah, it just seemed rushed.
Okay. Thank you. And then Michael, how about you?
I thought it was well facilitated, and my assessment of whether something worked or not in these protocols is what we hear from their original presenters. Like, did they get what they needed? And for the most part, I heard that the presenters did get value out of it. Although I do hear Jose wondering right now, did we answer the question that really helps the schools, or are we just talking about doing something to them? So that's a new thought to pursue. And my last thing, we have plenty of work to do, so I doubt that this is a good solution to anything. But I wonder if advanced interaction on a Google Doc with clarifying questions might be helpful. So we just get some out of the way before we start here, because I definitely had more clarifying questions, but didn't want to bog down the process and wanted to get to help, and get to the different phases. But maybe airing some things out virtually on a Google Doc beforehand, it could be totally optional, might be helpful.
Great, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Nick, and then Rob, just thoughts about the process?
Yeah, I appreciated your flexibility and everyone's flexibility with sort of us having, a couple different people being presenters. That was really helpful for me as team lead, and also to make sure that we were really getting the right perspectives out there. So we just really appreciate you. It was also really cool that Cindy and Sarah were able to sort of be part of our presenting team as well. So I just appreciate you all being patient with that.
Great. Thanks. Rob, any thoughts about the protocol or this medium? Anything that could be streamlined? Oh.
Yeah, my video is going a little wild. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh. We can hear you.
Hello?
Hello. I don't know if he has chat up.
Oh, okay. So I thought the question was a great question. I thought it was very well facilitated. I think that with respect to
oh no.
Oh, he's cutting out. Sorry. Okay. Daisy, I'm going to give you a time check. You got 5 minutes.
Okay. Scott and Tom, you guys have the last word, and then we'll do some upcoming stuff, and then we're done.
With or feedback about this other than something simply asking to do.
We'll see if we can get Rob's comments at the end afterwards with a quick text.
Yeah, I'll go because then I have to go. But this is more of a musing more than anything else. But I'm going to be going next. So is there a possibility to tweak protocols if we find that we want something a little bit different?
Yes, please. Let's talk about it. And whatever you need, we could do that after, and then we'll work with that.
Okay. So if I have any suggestions, then I'll kind of send them your way, and then we can talk about it, and I'll mention it to Stacy.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And Tom.
So just echo appreciation for you, Daisy, for herding the digital cats, and I liked Michael's suggestion. I think maybe to Scott's point of thinking about how we open up space for more discussion and pulling out some of the clarifying questions into other spaces, or I don't know if that works for consultancy or not. And then I would say it was really nice having Cindy and Sarah on the call, and I think I wasn't apprehensive, but I think I'm curious sometimes as to whether or not you can have a network-wide question and then have specific teams there to kind of hold that space. But I thought it was actually a really nice, like a concrete example to talk about in thinking about the question. So nice to have them.
Great. And I think we have one last slide, which has the upcoming events, which it sounds like Scott, you just decided to go. Do we have that slide, Ryan? Just for the quick. You're the best. You're the best. See, now I did it when it was live.
Look, there you go. It's up.
Okay, awesome. So on the horizon, Scott, on May 12th with Asia Society. So yeah, just be in contact and we'll figure out what that protocol could look like. And then there's an all-team share-out on the June 9th. And just stay tuned for more details. I was trying to pick Stacy's brain before this, but so she probably has lots of good ideas, and they'll be coming your way. And then just
at home and is sick watching this, so
right. So I don't know. She caught that dreaded flu. So, and then look out for a doodle poll for next year's dates, and keep thinking through NIC AIM level measures and templates. I think we're going to want to try and get something in place for next year around that. So, other than that, thank you so much for participating, and that was wonderful to see everybody virtually. So.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Look at that, 2 minutes to go. Good.
Thank you, New Tech team.
Bye, guys.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Bye, Nick.
Bye, everybody.